Good to be here. Been a long time Michael, Quan, and Andre fanboy, so it's good to kind of come in and join and see who's actually building these things that I'm using, which I have been using for quite a while. So again, my name's Kyle Rojas, head of BD and partnerships for Edge and Node, which is one of the core devs supporting the graph. And why bring the graph here? Well, it's because builders on Fantom can leverage the graph protocol to make sure they concentrate on UI, UX, and serving people actually using their projects, as opposed to going and building the stack themselves, which I'll explain. I know you probably, hopefully already had somewhat of an understanding already. I'll give you a high-level explanation of what the graph is, how it's helping devs like yourselves, a little bit about how we got here as an ecosystem, and then just how our roadmap is looking in general. If you have any questions, they said to wait till the end, but you can always sneak them in, and I'll try to answer fast. So I love this quote. Pretty sure most of you know by now, but it's pretty crazy how many people around the world don't yet know that the Web3 ecosystem and technology is growing probably faster than just about any technology that we've seen in human history. And the data needs that come with this shift are massive, as a lot of you probably know as well. And I want to throw out an analogy that really helps me and others understand what the graph does. So imagine going into a home improvement store like a Home Depot or Lowe's in America, or a Home Base in Europe and other places around the world. And imagine that store is 1,000 times the size of a normal store. And imagine if every tool, every screw, every appliance, every plant, every item were strewn all over that massive 1,000x size home improvement store. And not only that, millions of items were dropped in every single day, in no particular order, just kind of airdropped, if you will. And the most recent items would probably be the easiest to find. But what about all that junk underneath the billions, trillions, or quadrillions of other items at the bottom? And if you think about it in a basic way, this is kind of what data looks like on the blockchain. So if you want a piece of data for your dApp or someone else's dApp, just like an item in that store, you have to go scrounging around manually, and it's not fun, and we hear it all the time, and it's just an experience across the industry in general. But that's where the graph comes in. The graph is indexing and allowing queries for all existing on-chain public data. It's pretty incredible what the protocol does. And just imagine when, not if, Web3 eats the world's data, right? Medical information, personal information of all types, supply chain information, social activity, social platform activity, and just like even tracking groceries when there's an outbreak to find out which fruits or veggies actually were contained or actually were contaminated. I really think that's where we're going, right? Web3 will eat the world's data, and the graph will be used to access it. And here is where we are right now. Though this data is almost always out of date, as the space is growing so fast, blockchain securing well over $2 trillion per day in value, and the data requirements are growing parabolically as well. And the graph is just an essential part of the Web3 stack supporting this wave. And just to kind of double click on this Web3 stack in general, what we're trying to help make happen here is a permanent, decentralized, and permissionless, very important, permissionless stack where anyone can both participate in the economics and governance, right? And that devs feel like they don't have to go through the Web 2 route to building. We want builders to need either not have to build their stack from scratch or use a centralized service of some sort, which is subject to all sorts of attacks, right? Physical, cyber, regulatory, governmental, which is pretty relevant right now. And those things can shut down building at the drop of a hat, and that's what we do not want. And that's one of the main reasons we believe in decentralization, right? At our core, at my core, which is why I kind of blew up my previous life to do this. We want builders concentrating on innovating. We want them building something new, not replicating something that could be done as a public good like the graph for data, or like decentralized encryption and storage services, or anything else that's part of the stack in general. So the quick question for the group real fast. With a show of hands, how many of you kind of knew what the graph did before this chat? Not bad. And just to see how many have participated in the ecosystem, how many of you are holding GRT, the utility token for the ecosystem? All right, keeping your hands up, how many of you are delegating those to help secure the protocol? A lot of hands went down. All right, well, let's get those numbers up. And let me know if you need me to talk through there, but that's really important to increase the indexing capacity for the system. How many of you have used subgraphs before? Not many. How many of you have built subgraphs? Love it. Well, just know that the more people participating in this, the more secure it is, right? The more decentralized, the more indexers we have, the more people delegating to help increase the capacity of indexers, the better this is going to be for the entire space. And just to give you some history on how the graph began, we started with 3 founders: Yaniv, the visionary, Brandon, the economics and incentives expert, and Giannis, who's the genius coder builder. And they formed the foundation for the graph. We launched the hosted service, essentially our SaaS service that most are using, about 2 years ago, and we launched the decentralized network in July of this year, which only hosts Ethereum Layer 1 right now, unfortunately, but will soon span all of the Ethereum virtual machine compatible networks. And we've also announced support for Near, Solana, Polkadot, Cosmos, and we're working with a lot of others behind the scenes. But really what we're doing, we're working to make sure we get to true cross-chain functionality, a dream that Andre is big on and that I truly believe as well. And that's where we're going, right? The graph is already one of the most used protocols in the space, and we'll talk about the numbers on what that means. Most DeFi apps in the EVM-compatible space use the graph right now, and it's pretty crazy when you think about it. So these numbers are pretty crazy, pretty weird. After only 2 years from the launch of our hosted service, we have over 1.4 billion queries per day, right? This actually said 1.3 billion because that was the number when I updated these slides earlier this month, but the number is growing faster than I can actually update our marketing decks. Compare that to Google. 2 years after launch, they had 22 million queries per day. 8 years after launch, Google had less than 250 million queries per day. We have 1.4 billion 2 years after launch, and it's growing parabolically. And that's only builders in the space, right? dApps actually tapping in to use this technology. We've had over 24,000 developers work on this technology over the past few years. All the builders have built anywhere, a little over 24,000 subgraphs of these open APIs that the protocol uses, with about a little over 20,000 right now actually live on the ecosystem, because we want to make sure we cut off some of those zombie subgraphs that are kind of increasing the latency on the efficiency. And again, starting from indexing only Ethereum, the graph is now providing indexing services for 24 EVM-compatible networks, and that's growing fast, with more news coming out. Can't give away too much too fast. But of these 24, Fantom was number 11. And I think it's worth noting that Andre and the rest of the team that was working behind the integration accomplished it in like 24 hours. Pretty great for our team to work with amazing technology enthusiasts and builders like Andre and the Fantom team in general. And there are more subgraphs that we're building all the time that we're helping Michael and Quan and others for Arteon and all these different projects. It's just exciting times, right? And it's really only the beginning of what the graph will do for the space and this world in general. And I know it's a Fantom conference. I'm, as I mentioned, a longtime Fantom holder and a huge DeFi participant. I own most of the NFTs. I love this space. I've been tinkering for a long time in this space. But Andre's dream of the cross-chain world is really important to me, because I think that's where we're headed. Kind of we all can make it. We're all going to make it up only mentality. And here we are. Five months after launch of the decentralized network, the first wave of 10 subgraphs migrated to the decentralized network shortly after launch, and we have a little over 200 subgraphs of the open APIs that have made the migration. But that's 200 of the over 20,000 currently on our hosted network. What's important about the decentralized network to really emphasize is that it will be the most robust, least expensive, and most reliable indexing and query protocol in the world, right? A public good that anyone can use. And we know the hosted service, if any of you have dealt with it, we know it has issues, right? Which is what Fantom and every other layer 1, layer 2, and sidechain has been using, since ETH's the only one stable enough to be run in the wild on it. But ultimately, it's a centralized service that we're paying out of pocket to show how essential this technology is, and it's not what the graph will be long term. The graph is going to be all projects from all chains using the hundreds and hopefully thousands of indexers, mostly anonymous, all around the world, composing a system that's resistant to attacks of all types, right? Physical, cyber, regulatory, and the like. And so when one indexer goes down, or even many go down, your data indexing needs and archive node storage essentially doesn't go away, right? Other indexers immediately via this protocol tap in to make sure they keep the system flowing. And that's what's important about decentralization. It really matters to us, and I hope it matters to a lot of you. And for the folks who have migrated, for anyone that's using subgraphs and will eventually migrate, it's been a relatively easy process. We're working hard to make it just as simple for all EVM-compatible networks, like Fantom, of course, and eventually it'll work for everyone. Happy to talk at the end in Q&A or over a beer or triple espresso on what this might look like. And this is what the decentralized network looks like so far. 161 mostly anonymous indexers from Asia to America, 7,300 delegators delegating over 2 billion GRT to the system to increase capacity for it and then sharing the rewards of the indexers, and over 2,200 curators signaling which subgraphs the indexers should be putting their capacity to. And again, it's still so early, right? This launched 5 months ago. It's pretty insane. And no surprise here, this is where the query volume is coming from, and DeFi is 90% of the volume, 70% of the subgraphs, but 90% of the volume. Quick show of everyone's hands here. Who's building in the DeFi space? What about the data analytics space? NFT? I know there's some overlap there. But then there's DAOs, the cross-chain world, wallets, and so on. And I can't wait to see how this changes. I love seeing how this changes. And any of us that have been in the space for a while, you see that you just really don't know what every bull and bear market building is going to happen. What's important is that builders make these changes, builders push this forward, and all we want to do is empower builders. I think I already had a little bit of how the protocol works. I'm happy to dive in after in Q&A, but just to make sure, people build subgraphs, sometimes with our help, but we want it to be a permissionless system, or those open APIs, and those subgraphs scrape and organize data from all chains via GraphQL within the ecosystem, and curators signal which data on the subgraphs need to be indexed, and then the indexers store that data. Again, happy to dive in later. And I already hit the points here, but one thing that stands out that you should know is if you're running your own archive nodes or you're using a centralized service, our data is showing that the graph will be at least 10x less expensive than running your own stuff, right? Good for your stress level, good for your wallet, and just allows you to concentrate on UI, UX, and go deal with people and build something new, not recreate a Web3, recreate a stack that we can do through a public good. And I think this is important too, just to reiterate how important decentralization is to this team. We actually decentralize the graph itself, which is why I work for Edge and Node and not the graph. The founders gave up ownership of this protocol to the world as opposed to keeping it for themselves, which is incredibly admirable and one of the main reasons I joined this team as opposed to other opportunities I had in the space. And the other two organizations on the slide, Streaming Fast and Figment, are also core devs on the graph, but probably just the start of a massive cohort of amazing people with different employees and different cultures and different firms, and we can all work on this network together, right? We could drive it forward together, allowing the world to decide how this thing evolves, not just a few people behind closed doors. And obviously, Web3 is a new kind of digital world. It's a first for the human species, for us all to be able to participate, not based on the color of our skin, where we went to school, or what's in our wallet. It's really cool. It's truly the first thing ever in the history of the human species to be able to do this, and I'm so excited to be able to work in it. And the graph, it's a truly global and open API owned by the world, as I mentioned, developed by everyone who wants a say, used by everyone regardless of where they're from. It's truly decentralized, right? That's why we're here. And that's why I blew up a dream life on Wall Street. And I was 12 years Air Force, almost 7 years Goldman Sachs. I'd made it. I had partner-level responsibility at Goldman, and it was killing me not to work in this space from the inside out, even though I've been participating in the space for probably 4 or 5 years. And finally, here's my contact info. If you're building in this space, you'll probably hear from me. You'll probably be interacting with me on Slack and Discord and Telegram, all of that stuff. I'm really trying to be always there as long as I'm not sleeping or being present with the family, and I've got kids, want to be a good dad, but you'll be interacting with me. So if you haven't met me or you haven't met Pranav, who's going to be going over how to build subgraphs in the system and utilize the protocol, then please come introduce yourself. Let's grab a coffee, a beer, something stronger, and let's just kind of chat and try to help make the world better. That's all I got for now. Any questions before I hop off? You can just yell them out or we can chat later. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.